All right, so we're delighted to have James Sherry with us tonight, and Najima accompanied by Eric Matchett. Charles is going to introduce James, and then Cynthia will introduce Najima and Eric after that. We want to acknowledge support from AZ Cares and also from Poets and Writers. And although it's in abeyance this year from Jim Wilcox and WAMO for the Arts District Warehouse Management, where when we're up live, we hold most of our readings. Also, we want to acknowledge support from the University of Arizona Poetry Center, Chax Press, the U of A English Department, and the Journal Arizona Quarterly. And then this takes a little bit of time, but we're really happy about it. I'm going to read you all of our patrons and sponsors. So our patrons are Charles Alexander, Mary Ellen Bartholomew, Charles Bernstein, Cynthia Hogue, Jason Lagapa, Joan Larkin, Judith Lefebvre, Cameron Louie, Lisa Martin, John Melillo, Cynthia Miller, Tenny Nathanson, Nancy Quigg, Stephen Romaniello, Stephen Salmoni, Will Stanier, Richard Tabner, and David Weiss. And our sponsors include Karen Brennan, Cutthroat, a Journal of the Arts, which is Pam Ushik, Reed Dixon, Lynn Finger, Barbara Henning, Jean Huving, Anna Lambert, Little Red Leaves, and that's Dawn Pendergast, Heidi McDonald, Barbara Miller, Lauren Mullen, Jameson Nunix, Oracle, Retreat for Writers, which is, again, I think Pam Ushik, Jenna Osman, Propolis Press, Anthony Sovak, Mariah Starr, Cole Swenson, Susan Thackeray, and Michelle Worthington. If you'd like to become a patron or a sponsor or otherwise donate, since we're not live, we don't have pledge forms to hand out, but if you go to the POG website, if you just Google POG Poetry or POG Arts Tucson, you'll find us. There's a donate button there, and we gratefully accept $100 donations to become a patron, $50 donations to become a sponsor, or any other donation you would care to give. And thanks very much for any support that you can offer. This is our last regularly scheduled reading for the current programming year for the spring, but we are planning a Zoom cocktail party April 30th from 6 to 8 Pacific Arizona time. And also please stay tuned for any possible drive-by readings or any other things that may turn up. Often that's the case. So we want this to be a safe space, which I think for tonight pretty much means the chat. So if in any way you feel bothered, hassled by anything anybody's saying or doing, please let one of the directors know. So that could be Charles, or you could just put it up in the chat, but me or Charles or Cynthia or Cameron or Lisa or David. And if there's somebody I'm missing, I can't see. Oh, Stephen. I think that's all the directors. Stephen's actually our president. So I think those are all our directors who are here. And then finally, we want to acknowledge that we're perched precariously and by the not always voluntary grace of others here in the Sonoran Desert. We're occupying lands rightfully belonging to the Tohono O'odham people and the Pasquayaki tribe, and we're in a unique, precarious, and fragile ecosystem. And many of us here still benefit from systemic racism while others suffer its effects. We hope that poetry can be one form, among others, of a community building that might help bring about desperately needed change. So that's it for the general announcements, and I'll turn it over to Charles to welcome James, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tenny.
Thank you, Tenny, and thank you, everybody. James Sherry is the author of 13 books of poetry and prose, most recently The Oligarch from Palgrave Macmillan, the poetry book Entangled Bank from Chax Press. His essay book Selfie, Poetry and Ecology is forthcoming from Palgrave in 2021. Since 1976, he has edited Roof Books and Roof Magazine, publishing more than 200 titles of seminal works of language writing, flarf, conceptual poetry, new narrative, and environmental poetry. He started the Segue Foundation, Inc. in 1977, producing over 10,000 events of poetry and other arts in New York City. On James Sherry's website, the interviews and reviews section begins its praise of the poet with Lorem ipsum dolor sit amet grace ermod. Okay, I know people weren't quite privy to James's work when most literary critical writing was in Latin, so that just won't do. But he has been around for a long time, battling, and sometimes it is a battle, as he knows, on behalf of poetry, but not just poetry, because more and more it's apparent that he sees poetry as but one of many interrelated tools in a constant struggle against the ongoing oppression of people, of culture, of life and liberty, and certainly in our last couple of decades against the oppression of the earth itself. Yet he does not simply rail against corporate forces and the oligarchs. Rather, he seeks to understand how economies actually work and how they might be convinced that environmental activism can even benefit them. He has rewritten Machiavelli's The Prince to properly advise today's oligarchs so that, quote, under your auspices may be realized that saying of Wordsworth, come into the light of things, let nature be your teacher. In this endeavor, he challenges some tenets of the writer as individual, knowing that we must work together. And he writes in Oops, Environmental Poetics, that, quote, to encourage individual organisms to see collective reality would be a valuable artistic contribution, unquote. Perceptions of collective reality are very much at the heart of Sherry's work, as a look at the whole of it. And that means poetry, environmental writing, political writing, poetics, or, as Kit Robinson has written of Sherry, his work pries open present life on the planet to reveal a tangled flow of vegetation, money, politics, beauty, selves, distributed networks, fish, nation states, death, and friendship. And all that shows that he seeks to understand and succeeds beyond just about any literary worker I know, planetary systems, the economy, the biosphere, the circulation of poetry through the work of presses and funding systems, and much more. He also understands that all of these systems are related. In writing in Oops of the poet Stacey Dorris's work, he talks about Dorris relating a variety of elements to establish a variety of connections between internal and external components, leading to a cognizant link of person and external components in an environment, which causes us to consider the nature not only of the poems, but of our own being, so that we see that works of poetry change as we read them again and again, that we are thinking as we read, and that I believe we change too. I would attach these qualities of connection to James Sherry's poetry and argue that a poetry that leads us to think and to understand the changing nature of thinking, language, and life is truly as fine a poetry as we might ask for. In recent years, Sherry has geographically spread his values in reading thinking toward global interpenetrations. In the Reciprocal Translation Project, an American-Chinese literary endeavor, his introduction with Sun Dong avers that socializing the process of writing, translation, and reading enriches the progression of the works from the world to the author and ultimately to the reader. We'd like our societies to understand each other through difference as well as commonality. Sherry's poetry enacts and requests that enrichment and understanding through differences, and has done so since his early works. In Shea Chink, in his 1982 Awidi Press book, Converses, where even the title signals acts of resistance, he writes of language and walls, of separations that lie and are broken, and asks us to read vertical. In the West, that it also is a kind of converse, and asks, what does such form do? That is, he questions what forms do, what poems do, questions what separations words enact. And it is not answers that he gives us, but invitations to further thought and action. The complexities of our entangled banks can be mind-boggling, and Sherry's poetry enters the fray with a scorn for oversimplification, yet also a base understanding that what seem like rather simple individual acts are important, and that even acts of kindness are sorely needed. In Entangled Bank, in a longish poem titled Darwin's Dog Reels, he simply asks at one point in these one-word lines, why aren't we nicer to each other on this bullet train to the grave? I know that I have been privileged to receive and have benefited from James Sherry's own kindness and generosity in poetry and in other aspects of my life on this bullet train. and I am honored, along with the other directors of POG, to present him here to you tonight. Please welcome James Sherry.
Thank you, Charles. That's wow. Can I get a copy of that?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, he memorized it. There is no copy. Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to take the recording then. Thank you so much, and thank you to Tenny Nathanson and the POG crew for putting this program together. Tonight, I'm really honored to be reading with just Najima. I heard them read or sing a bit before the program started, so I'll be looking forward to hearing the songs afterward. Tonight, I'll be reading about connections from the Borderlands chapter of my new manuscript, Selfie. Actually, I've been writing it for quite a few years, that I hope will be coming out from Palgrave this fall. When I start to read, I will be in familiar territory, but now I'm just talking about something that I know pretty well, but looks different in each situation I find myself in. So I feel like I'm stuttering through the introduction part because of not reading, not because I don't want to do it, but because I need to show the difference between the more or less fixed document, this known language that yet remains conditional to the reading, and things I don't know very well, like who you all are out there listening, although I know several. So this introduction, where I want to show you the context of the poem and the way we become acquainted. The written part, the document Selfie, addresses environmentalism by building a framework that includes the humanist model of self, society, and nature by treating self, society, and our surroundings as linked entities that are perceived by as separate. These connectors are the theme of the chapter of Borderlands. The chapter Borderlands starts with an epigraph from Gloria Anzaldúa in her book Borderlands, La Frontera, where I got the title of this chapter. She says, the U.S.-Mexican border es una herida abierta, where the third world grates against the firsts and bleeds. And before a scab forms, it hemorrhages again, the lifeblood of two worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture. While Gloria focuses on the suffering of border culture, I also want to point to Borderlands as a fertile area of change responsive to interaction. Standing in the way of implementing environmental culture that supports change, in-country humanism depends on reinforcing the separation of me from everyone else. Taoism, too, presents a yin-yang world separated by a thin, wavy line. That Taoist line is actually very wide and busily interacted. What transpires across these borderlands between individuals and laws, the interior structures built to defend prerogatives of class, gender, ability, and race, as well as limiting identities to pre-selected political agendas and artistic personae like poet, also impede awareness of the ecological connectivity that supports us. Borders are broader. Approach, edge, and enter, margins marginalize, and connect with page numbers, limits, limited range, shorter poles, path strengthens connections, property lines, assign, align, and conform. Let the sets reset assumptions, how nouns and verbs proliferate in English without telling us what to do with them, how to engage more specific speech, as with inhibition, I approach Borderlands. How may I address you? Frame borders as things with width, depth, height, and extension over time. The borders even. What's going on in that space between that can ally us. Prose becomes poetry and reverts to it too. Borderlands swell from one-dimensional lines through the composite model of things that includes molecules, nouns, individuals, nations, ecosystems. When we say an organism exists, can we say so for all parts or only when they come together in the known identity individuals construct of things and selves. Scale falters in perception but persists. Borders expand through thinking about them. The person can be said to exist, even described in parts, and may be conscious. Is my arm conscious? An octopus may be said to be conscious, and there is a greater likelihood of extending consciousness to its arms through a distributed nervous system, a distributed network and population. My brain is dark inside my skull, but connections fill me with light. The metaphor of boundary derived from a property model protects and separates unforgivingly. No trespass signs nailed every few trees. But there's no reason to think of sharp divisions except to protect you and yours. The COVID-19 virus makes this dual purpose apparent to me as I stay home to protect my health and the health of others in my community. With one gesture, I speak for myself and for others. While I protect myself, I expose myself to tyranny, allowing my groups to go unrehearsed. The risk of losing myself in this situation, the odds-on favorite. Corona shadow. As the buds break into new leaf, cloud shadows sweep the hills. Their moment of darkness threatens nothing will stop our spring. I know you now, but later you will be a stranger. I love you forever except when you annoy me. Please come and work for me until I make a mistake and fire you. Trade with my country until you gain an advantage. Then we can make war and profit from our people's suffering. I need you when I'm hungry. Surely you know these stories. The soil allows us to attach ourselves. The world allows the delusion of detachment. Attachment allows us to escape the illusion of outside. Detachment allows us the escape of borders. Self is the balancing act to be refined. I reflected, and now, like my reflection, perhaps too much. I store it in the back of my mind, and it comes back untoward. Across the street, I saw her inky noodle shattered against the vitrine of reflection. Seeing one thing through another, refraction and reflection both operate across borderlands. Put a pencil in a glass of water. See the giraffe. The space to the mirror shifts as I tilt my head. Methinks that in looking at things spiritual, we are too much like oysters, observing the sun through the water and thinking that thick water the thinnest of air. Moby Dick. Rather than trying to invent a generalization or definition of borderlands, I've written down a few examples of connections and ways to look at them. So I'll be reading these numbered examples. 1. Connections across borderlands may be point to point, like whispering a poem in your ear, distributed over several channels at once, like social media and broadcast, like cellular technology and solar radiation. 2. How amazing that text connects. I missed that scaled youth, that fish who escaped the lure twice. Slipped in votes for them, suppressing ballots of Browns. Yes, and so one is writing in two directions at once. 3. The palpable, measurable border between my hand touching yours, its heat, touch, run up the arm, focus the eyes, open the capillaries, supporting connections to biology, law, sex, and signs. 4. A taste you suffer where the flame ends. Variations, though, still one. Differences linked through assonance, rhyme. Those different words like six coiffed sisters in the setting, prosody, logic, and page. 5. The many layers of skin, 3 major, multiple minor. Blood vessels, nerves, hair, fat, integument. I kiss your cheek covered with bacteria. My lips splash through layers of increasing temperature, denser pheromones, resistance by your mind, even when you want that kiss. 6. The Seine River where sunlight ends. No, look, it sets here too. 7. Oppression of the other pushes strongly in one direction. responses to oppression, connection in Black communities, assertion of Southern lands, monolithic feminism and queerness, submission, questioning, dialectic, acknowledging universal disability, asserted consciousness, multiplicity, all contradict the singular view of self, society, and planet. 8. The indirect connections of a reference made to a friend about what you did. To whom? The words were spoken and difficult to retract since the discourse is material, remembered, archived. 9. Between I.A. Richards' tenor and voice, between Lakoff's source and target, connectors carry thrown light, black dogs, etherized patience, and world stages between sectors of the brain and words of the texts. 10. Characters in novels speaking to each other on lawns. 11. The soil allows us to attach ourselves and our plants, while the world too much with us provokes detachment. Attachments evaporate the illusion of a great being outside. Detachment helps us escape the delusion of borderline. 12. A dark green raincoat she ran into. Pouring a glass of water overwhelms the lip. 13. Fruit flies dance out our door. I catch you saying that again. Again, you must be somewhere to mean it. A selfie shows what was behind you and around. 14. The intermittent but regular connections of taxmen reaching, the toll taker receiving, connection plate passing, the date waiting for you. Connectivity breaches the personal social boundary linking many to many. 15. Is there any connection between a screen loading and recall? Is there any shape to it? 16. The strong connections of motherhood, the weaker yet still material connections of fatherhood, the connections of love clearly material and based on fluid exchange, chattel, and use value, the different connections of friendship supported by various roles, such as long relationships, jobs and interests, friendships, enjambment due to other friendships. (17) Divine destination in your eyes, somewhere I, we, they, the heavenly hostess cupcakes hoping not to be toppled by Twinkies. 18. The model links characters in theater, actors on political stages, ghosts that haunt our demonstrable things, and those that exist most strongly in language and sensibility, the connections across lines of thought that science proves, and those it doesn't validate. 19. How far do I have to go to get to where you are so we can be here? 20. The strong connections of a black man to the daily pain and pride of his color. The characteristics of that connection, job performance, family stability, the height of his belt, when pain bleeds into self-doubt, what is spoken about as color, the resilience against pain fashioned by the community. 21. Driven by dread of distinction, however the image enters, Audre Lorde. The perversity of separation, isolation, Amiri Baraka. An intensely slanted approach, Edward Bland. 22. We Jews learned our lesson, shepherds, then millennia of separation from Christian societies, trying to connect and link the borders in Europe. We joined the elite and the working classes. The border reasserts itself in Holocaust. Jews flee to Palestine, US, and Argentina. Now Israel reproduces that European border with a wall to protect it from those very Palestinians whose name the land bears. The wall ignores citizenship, familial ties, human rights to protect individual, threatened Jewish bodies, corporate productivity, and the corpse of the state. Reconnect despite the risks and threats to life in tribe. 23. A boomer generation protecting truth at all costs connects to a generation intent on no harm at all costs. 24. The connections of youth to age, anger to fear, power to privilege, sex to love that reiterate binary identity. 25. Beauty connected to arbitrary choices and to patterns of calcium propagation and to realms of mathematical possibility and to economics by our willingness to write through activation and inhibition signals, through air, through mind, with light in random placement of color on her feathers, as in poetry we inhabit grammar through connectors to politics, deleting the to metric apostrophes, to prosody, adding through which readers awake their aware. 26. I wrote a personal poem through me, a social poem through them, an eco-poem through feet, connecting them with a fourth line. 27. Bidirectional connectors of gender, a sport teams, how strongly class distinctions and daily activities determine and reestablish connections to build a social network, flexible borderlands. 28. Yourself is not a unit of one. Bidirectional writing. That's the whole poem, because any word could appear next. It's just a fact of writing, and if you object that a perfect world should appear next or some synonym, then you haven't been paying attention. 29. The intermittent connections to corporate identity reinforced by marketing, advertising, and public relations. Leaders seek to create connections between workers and management, while severing connection between workers that strengthen their communities. Supply chains imitate family ties and forest ecology, as well as slave trade routes. Fred Moten. 30. Corporate identity links consumers and suppliers of product to the corporate body that acts like an organism, acts like a city, acts like a mind. Marsilius of Padua. 31. Connections are nouns made up of components, an overpopulated DMZ to make want disappear and create desire. Like all things connected and simultaneously separate, a characteristic of language. 32. I don't remember. Cure. Obsessive productivity recapitulates the self. 33. The connections across boundaries between one poem and another, both of which I wrote. The connections and borderlands between poems I wrote and those you wrote. The connections and social borderlands between a poet and a group of poets, casual and formal. Connections across social boundaries between poets and groups and a group of non-poets. Walls between poets and markets, connections and walls, borderlands between poetry and society. Connections made here between poetry and the biosphere, what I'm writing here and speaking now, connecting, I hope, to you. 34. Multiple uses of the same thing, pliers to open and close, tie otherwise diverse functions out there in the field and inside in the head together, enjambment as a mental condition. 35. Links don't just exist at the edges of entities. Many begin from the core function of an individual's love, family, blood flow, property, and poetry. Interior to interior connections are as crucial to the organism than those beginning at the edges of entity, because every organism is composed of many linked parts. 36. One more poem here. If you write it, then we're a thing. 37. These are my personal boundaries. Do not cross them. 38. Some things are connected and function together, like a fork and spaghetti. Some things appear to be connected by being in a related category, but the connection is not functional, like a fork and a banana. Some things might be functionally related, but are not usually used at the same time, like a claw hammer and a sledgehammer. Some things are functionally unrelated and don't appear together, like a kangaroo and a hammer. And some things are functionally unrelated, but have other relations, like a giraffe and a pencil. Remember connections to the glass of water. 39. Breaking and entering, into the paradise of me, suffering in my domain. Remind the preacher that life is surplus energy. The surplus energy founds and causes warming. Why do I want to sustain that image, that paradise of glass that poetry should let pass into sand? Borderlands, connectors composed this way become porous and permeable, scary to the highly defended self. They are difficult to contemplate as a unit since they are composites of diverse connections, diverse characteristics, yet they are commonplace, unnoticed. The poet sees this coming and protects their lyric. Hold to your biases, close to see me. Hold your biases close to see me being we. Cut your connections, but continue to look proud. If you push your biases toward me, can we be we? Can I be we? Not royally, but a composite? The one is still two, self and other. Plus one, yourself as you see you. Plus society, habitat, and connections. The foursome of the environmental model questions singularity and binary identity. Inversely, the human notion of connection defends private property, unique personal identity, linear borders, and accumulation of capital behind those borders. As Myung-Mi Kim says, accumulation of land, maintain household, bear labor of housechild, cooking reserve line belonging to elaborate isolation. And why would selves be any more inviolable under capitalism? Fearful landowners think their selves must be uninfringible, identifying with an established value like property, like states, like nation states. Should poetry imitate property and state? When as a publisher do I change my mind and want academics who cite my publications to pay for the right to reprint? Existentially, the values of property fluctuate. The facts about values vary. History shows little immutable value beyond narrative. Where does that leave the defended immutable self? The real wilderness is the space between us. Or as Marie Buck says, and the best you can do is cut a sock in half and try to create something I want to have. Thank you.
Thanks, James. That was terrific. And now, without any other break, we'll slide over to Cynthia, who's going to introduce Najima and Eric.
Thank you. Am I in? Should I sit by you closer? Okay. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce Najima and Eric. I haven't heard them nearly often enough, but they are unforgettable. And I'm sure you'll agree with me after you hear this short concert. My parents loved jazz. We listened to the likes of Ella Fitzgerald, Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, all wonderful original female vocalists with stories to tell, unforgettable. And that's what I hear again and experience new with the powerful vocals of Najima Rainey. Okay. Armed with her eyes wide open, an MFA in creative writing, this native Tucsonan and a singing voice few will ever match. It's just Najima, her professional name. Okay. She marries traditional country heartbreak and the bittersweet, big lonesome of the desert Southwest and what some call Southwestern Gothic soul. Her two albums include Endless Summers and Queenie. Tonight, she's accompanied by master guitarist Eric Matchett. What is Portland, Oregon's loss has been Tucson's gain. And he brings his own deep listening obsession and pedal steel guitar to back her poetry and her song. Post-COVID, you could hear Eric and his group, the Broke Down Palace, will be playing around Tucson, hopefully with Najima. So enjoy just Najima and Eric Matchett.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. My name is Najima. I go by just Najima on stage. I explain because Najima means shining star, which is the popular name, just not in America. So there's lots of performing Najimas in Arabic countries and all of that. So I'm just Najima. You can find my albums on Spotify and iTunes, all of that. We're going to start with one of my favorites, Dinah Washington's What a Difference a Day Makes. What a difference a day makes. 24 little hours brought the sunlight and the flowers where there used to be rain. My lonely days are through, dear. Now I'm a part of you, dear. My yesterdays were blue, dear, till you said you were mine. What a difference a day makes. There's a rainbow before me. Skies above can be stormy. Since that moment of bliss, that thrilling kiss, it's heavenly when you find romance, I am in you. What a difference a day makes, and the difference is you. All right, cool. That was good. You awesome, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. So the next song we'll play. I love to sing lots of old blues, mostly country blues, not kind of like more Chicago blues, which is what you hear more in clubs and stuff. I like the old country blues because it's so dreamy. This is one of my favorite songs by Reverend Gary Davis. And it's an old blues song that lots of people have covered. And this is my version of the song. It's called Candyman. And he's new to town. He's a candy man. He's a salty dog. He's got sugar. He's so sweet. He put you in the coma, wake you up next week. He's the candy man. He's a salty dog.
Candyman, you're salty down. Candyman, salty down. Baby, be my Candyman, be my salty down. Candyman, where you been? Coconut and cinnamon, come right in. He's the Candyman, he's a salty dog. Sprinkle sugar between these sheets, and now we're too sticky to get back to sleep. He's the Candyman, he's a salty dog. Candyman, salty dog. He's a Candyman, he's a salty dog. Candyman, salty dog. Baby, be my Candyman, be my salty dog. Candyman, been here and gone. All we left behind was a sweet sad song. He's a Candyman, he's a salty dog. Candyman, come back again. Caramel drizzle all on your chin. You're a Candyman, you're a salty dog. Candyman, salty dog. You're a Candyman, you're salty dog. Candyman, salty dog. Baby, be my Candyman, be my salty dog.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, y'all. Thank you. Hey, Mary Rose, I can hear you clapping in the back room. Thanks for the support, baby. All right, awesome. Now we're gonna play a song that is off of my album Queenie. It is actually a traditional gospel hymnal. Maybe a lot of you have heard of it. It's called Somebody Talking About Jesus, born on Christmas morn. Somebody talking about Jesus. So I changed the lyrics to make it more about what's going on here in regards to the border and here in Tucson, my hometown. All right. Did we decide to just do tambourine?
Oh, you wanted to do tambourine?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's just do tambourine.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if we were doing this live, I would ask you guys to get a beat, which has varying degrees of success because let me tell you, some of the audiences of Tucson are very off the beat. But Eric is just gonna.
I'm following you.
He's accompanying me with those tambourines. Well, you got to give me the. Everywhere I go, I know, everywhere I go, well, somebody talking about Jesus, no room here for refugees, somebody talking about Jesus.
can't share abundance will charge a fee. Somebody talking about Jesus. Through my lawn and with the sea. Somebody talking about Jesus. I broke apart and lost my family, but somebody talking about Jesus. Alright, everywhere I go, everywhere I go, my Lord, everywhere I go. Well, somebody talking about Jesus. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, my Lord, everywhere I go. Well, somebody talking about Jesus. Made it through the jungle, soles on my feet. Somebody talking about Jesus. White man spit like I'm a dog in the street, but somebody talking about Jesus. Brown skin Madonnas, sweet bell well. Somebody talking about Jesus. Till and Texas built the rich man's jail. Somebody talking about Jesus. Alright, everywhere I go, everywhere I go, my Lord, everywhere I go. Well, somebody talking about Jesus. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, my Lord, everywhere I go. Well, somebody talking about Jesus. Last time, everywhere I go, everywhere I go, my Lord, everywhere I go. Well, somebody talking about Jesus. All right, thank you. Okay, so the last two songs are going to be originals from the Just Najima catalog. It's not very thick. It's more of a notebook, but I'm working on it. This song is called Rainbow to Follow. You can also find it on my album Queenie, streaming, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you use. Listen to it. It'll get my numbers up. That's always good for me. Get my numbers up. If for nothing but to encourage me. This song is called Rainbow to Follow. I wrote it kind of like after a really dark period for me, like everything had kind of, like not just the state of the world was falling apart, which it definitely was, but at the same time, a lot of stuff in my life was falling apart. And I wrote this song on the other side of that, feeling kind of like I wanted to write a song that captured a feeling you can't quite express with words, which is what I love about music and why I express myself in music, because something about combining words and melodies, it gets more exactly to the point of what you're trying to say, right? So this is that song. I hope you can feel where I was coming from when I wrote it. I'm looking for a rainbow to follow. I'm hoping for some sunshine today. I'm hoping that now might be fine, 'cause I know how to lose, but you gotta win sometimes. I used to believe in something. I used to believe in me. I'm not sure how I lost my way. Can't tell anymore if I'm lonesome or free. I walked a long way in the wrong direction, just to turn around and find out to me. I thought I knew my soul, thought I knew my heart. Perceptions I swallowed are devouring me. Sometimes when I'm looking for sunshine, my coach, I'm looking for a spark gonna burn down this torch. I'm thinking it's time for me to try again, 'cause you have to lose, but sometimes you win. I know this is heading somewhere. I think the time's finally right. Gonna write our own stories. We are the dark, but we're also alive. All right. Awesome. Yay. Yay. Okay. We got one last song. This one I'm going to perform on my looper. One of the things that I've been messing around with before quarantine, but especially during quarantine, was my RC505 looper. It's a vocal looper, so it allows me to create melodies with my voice. And this is a song I wrote, and I think this will be the last song. The song's called Caught Up, and it's on my EP Endless Summers. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and boom, 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 boom. Oh, ignore that. That was the wrong one. Here it is. Boom, 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 boom.
I'm caught up. Don't you know I'm caught up? It hurts my pride that you make me feel. I know it ain't love, but I want you still. So what does that mean? And what does this call? I liked it before, when we were nothing at all. I'm caught up, boy, I'm caught up. I'm caught up, oh, I'm still caught up. I'm caught up, boy, I'm caught up. I'm caught up, oh, I'm still caught up. Thought me and my mind, we was all made up. This very last time, I said enough is enough. 'Cause who in the hell wants to be in this place? No sets and no actors, just us on this page. I'm caught up, boy, I'm caught up. I'm caught up, oh, I'm still caught up. So maybe this prayer will be the last of this time. We can't stay caught up for the rest of our lives. You need your sleep, and I'll be up all night. I like my space, and you like your wife. I'm caught up, boy, I'm caught up. I'm caught up, oh, I'm still caught up. We both know that this is goodbye. We've said it before, but it feels different this time. Since we won't meet again in this secret place, let's kiss it goodbye and depart with some grace. And that was our show. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the music.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you, Najima. Eric.
Your living room.
Thank
So
you.
thanks so much to James and to Najima and Eric. Another completely wonderful POG evening. What we usually do is we hang around for 10 or 15 minutes and have a little conversation if we want to. Time when anybody can ask any of the performers anything within reason, and we'll just see where it goes. We won't drag on too long. But, so I think people can just talk unless we get a proper jam. So.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting.
It was It was very interesting for me to hear Najima do that whole range of different genres, which is the kind of thing that I'm also interested in doing in poetry. But what I didn't recognize were her last piece seemed to defy the genre and to be something totally unique and out of the ordinary.
Oh, thank you. First off, thank you. You win. Like, we're best friends now. And two, that's why I call it Southwestern Gothic Soul. I think it hopefully encompasses all of those things, like the blues, the soul, the kind of my goth nature, all of those desperate elements coming together to make a sound that I hope is kind of unique into itself. It's something that I've been working on, trying to define, So thank you for noticing. You win. I appreciate it.
I think for me, there was something in that mix and that border defying kind of singing, and then James's framing of that border conversation, and especially when you got at the end caught up. And I know, what it literally means in that song, but yet it made me think of the kinds of entanglements that James was talking about too. So I didn't anticipate noticing between the two parts of this evening such connection, but I did.
Yeah, I was really struck by how much connection there was between us, and I really appreciate it. And also, really excited to know that people are doing music that is already engaged in this kind of multiple frameworks. Mm-hmm. So really great to hear it.
Well, I think it's really cool, but I think it's part of, it's in the air down here, right? We're all thinking about border issues. We're all looking at it and seeing the dissonance between how they discuss the border and how it feels to be on the ground and near it. So I think that a lot of us I don't think it's unusual. I think a lot of us who've been kind of trapped at home, really ruminating on what's going on and how it's impacting us are thinking about these same kind of complicated and very volatile and emotionally frustrating issues,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to bring it down from the art world to the more practical world, up here we just get the news that the border looks like a mess. What does it feel like there?
Obstacles.
I mean, it depends on who you are. For me, as someone who's been active in the last decade, not as active as lots of other people, what it seems like to me is our government is paying for a consistent campaign of terror against brown and black people. Brown and black people who are guaranteed by our Constitution the right to ask if they can live here. That's not a crime. That's not a crime. And so, yeah, it is a mess. It is a mess, but it's a mess you can't ignore if you choose to. So, it comes crashing in to me anyways, the way I see it, it comes crashing in at times. But if I choose not to tune into it, I can live my life not engaging. And that's how a lot of people down here live. But if you are engaged, it's impossible not to see it as, in my opinion, a campaign of terror. our government engaging in activities and engaging in behaviors and terrorizing people in a way that when we see movies about it in other countries, we say that's a lawless government, you know. But that's my perception of it. I don't know how other people down here perceive it, what it seems like to them.
Does it feel any different between the Trump and Biden administrations?
Not yet.
I mean, it feels different in that people seem to think it's different. Like, you know, people seem to feel different about it, but so far from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like they're doing much to make a difference. It seems, but also it was a problem that was not going to be solved. Like,
That.
Biden was not going to solve it. Biden was never going to solve it. It was not, the solutions we need bold, like, leadership. And I'm not talking about dumb Trump leadership. I mean, like, bold leadership that says no to fucking people who don't give a shit about human rights and human beings, you know? Like, why are we negotiating with people who don't give a shit about human beings and asking their opinions about what we should do? It's bad for the human beings. It's bad for the environment, the border wall, the camps. The camps are an outrage, and they continue to exist. They're an outrage. Knowing that they exist, it fills me with shame. That we
can drive to it. We can drive to an internment camp where kids have died in a cage.
It fills me with shame that every day I get up and just make my egos and drink my coffee and live my life, because I know that is happening where I'm from, but that I can ignore it and continue my life every day. And that's the worst part for me. That's the worst. That's the most painful part for me. Is that I am continuing to just live my life. You know, I went to Ross today. I went and got a new couch. You know, I'm worried about my bills. I did this, but there is internment camps in my town.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very sobering explanation, and I thank you for sharing that with us.
I'm sorry. This is like a topic I can't talk about without getting really emotional and passionate.
All right.
I'm so sorry.
James, you had a line where you said, you know, the world is too much with us promotes detachment. But I think maybe if you're this close to the border and it is so overwhelmingly much with you, it's much harder to be detached, or at least to not be detached without an awareness that you are choosing to detach yourself.
Yeah.
And that's shameful.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Tucson all my life. I was born here. And if you live here long enough, you start to see it's hidden, but it's right in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Trump did the roundups at the beginning, ICE was everywhere. If you knew what to look for, you could see them.
Yeah.
And you could see, people being afraid to leave their homes.
A campaign of terror. You know, that is a campaign of terror. If you're scared to leave your house because you're afraid that your children may come home to an empty house, you're scared to ask for help because, it's a campaign of terror, you know?
I
remember can feel it. I can feel it anyways.
In Portland, when they had the secret police, everyone was all upset about the secret police in Portland. When the courthouse got spray painted, those people were from our town. We have them all the time. We know who they are. You know, the border TAC teams, the people that don't have insignia out in the desert. You know, we know who you don't mess with them. You just don't.
I haven't seen ICE very much in New York City, but one day I was on the subway at a big central stop, and there were a couple of ICE agents waiting at the turnstiles, and this old guy like my age was just shouting at them to get out of the subway and get out of our town, and they just like were backing away from him because he was so angry. It was totally amazing to see that.
Yeah, you quoted the Untitled Chapter, and one of the things she's really good on is evoking the extent to which the border is a very broad region, not a line at all, but a big swath of territory for which the national border is just it's a fiction with power right now, but it doesn't at all correspond to families and communities and how people transact their daily lives and all that. So for me, every time I've been or lived near borders, I've noticed that it's a specific culture that's actually similar in different places, whether it's a state border in America or a national border. There's a lot of similarity about the border culture. Some of the New York Times stuff a few months ago on the situation in Texas was really good in that regard, because they interviewed a lot of people, just saying, the border hysteria is just crazy. This is it's a culturally stable region, this sort of broad swath of territory. And, we don't have any sense of, we're on one side and they're on the other, and they're about to stay that way.
Yeah. Well, this was a really fortuitous and combination. So thank you, Charles and Tenny, for putting it together. And Cynthia, are you the curator for Najima?
I don't know. I want her to be on here every week, but that's probably not possible. James, I had a question for you in the work that you're doing, connecting social activity in the individual and nature and stuff. Are you aware of Joanna Macy's work?
Joanne Macy? No.
Joanna Macy. Okay. That's something you might want to look into.
Thank you. What's her name again?
Joanna Macy, Macey. She started something called The Work That Reconnects, and it's all about sort of waking yourself up to be with nature and to recognize things that, that nature is part of the world and not out there, something other, and how that leads to social activism. And a lot of the people that she's inspired are farmers and, they're land people. Very interesting work. Very interesting.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to know about that. There's so much going on. You try and keep up, but it's hard to even get past the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I see Judy knows about Joanna as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm.
Can Judy unmute herself again?
I don't know.
No, she can't.
Okay. Najima, I wanted to thank you for singing Candyman, Salty Dog. That's such a sweet song. Well, however you want to take that, yeah.
I love that song. It's a really fun song. Yeah. It's one of my favorites. I love the Reverend Gary Davis version, and it honestly, it took me years of editing and adding and taking stuff out to figure out my kind of like my perfect version of Reverend Gary Davis's song. And I feel like that's really my version of Candyman. And it connects me to, a blues tradition that goes generations before me. So that's another reason I enjoy and get so much inspiration out of singing those old blues and those old jazz standards.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have a record of Gary Davis singing that song at the Newport Blues Festival in 1961.
That's great.
Najima probably wasn't born.
James, I also wanted to say I felt your talk reading performance was also very kind of genre bending and inclusive. There were moments where it felt like drama, where you were engaging between the I and the you, or the I and the borderlands as characters, which was really effective. And there were other moments where just the tone of it was either poetic or very dramatic. And I know you end your book, Oops, with a little drama piece. And it seems like you're trying to involve all aspects of poetic literary creation in this work in the world. And I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or just...
Well, that's why I was so interested in Najima's putting together multiple genres in a single song, because it's exactly the way I feel about writing. There's so much of the commercial world is devoted to staying tightly within the genre, or academic work staying within the discipline, or poetry writing only poetry, or painters only painting paintings and not doing drawings, or drawings and not doing paintings. That this kind of increasingly narrow framework that we've got, seems to be impeding us from progress. In fact, the Secretary of the Navy said a few years ago that the separations of the academic disciplines was the chief inhibitor to progress in thought. So it's not my idea, but it's in the air and people are thinking about it. The problem is that there is really there's a lot of problems with cross-disciplinary work.
Oh, yeah.
Because the languages of each discipline are so bordered and rigid themselves that it's hard to find the right words.
It's I think it's even worse than that. I mean, I think people are so even locked into within certain disciplines who their mentors were and how they speak about a problem, as opposed to how some other thinker speak about a problem. I'm in a comparative theory group online, and this comes up all the time, these difficulties in talking to each other.
Yeah, we hear that, I mean, in the poetry world that you and I inhabit all the time. Everybody's hating everybody else because they're slightly different. Yeah. But when you hear them, they're actually, working on the same material with the same vocabulary. But this has a lot to do with capital and identity, and the necessity of creating a personality that's a kind of property. So it extends outward from the individual controlling themselves and protecting themselves to the group controlling itself and protecting itself from other groups, to every person protecting itself from the outside. So this is why the borders are so difficult to deal with.
Eric, are you still there?
Yes.
Out of there.
You play music in a bunch of diverse ways with a bunch of diverse groups, and I just wonder if you relate to this conversation, but I also wonder what it's like playing with Najima.
It is an honor. It's one of my favorite things to do. But I view music as sort of I don't know if it's a calling, it's a path. It's a spiritual path for me. So I don't have any hesitancy about not knowing what I'm playing.
That's pretty great. Yeah, I like that.
Is your work on the recordings with Najima?
Actually, no.
I had the albums. Okay, well, Queenie, I produced with, I don't know if you guys know a local artist named Jillian Bissett. She had Jillian and the Giants, and she's kind of like, she also uses a looper. Anyways, she is also a music producer, and she helped me initially when we were first putting together the CD. It was just going to be like a CD of covers for me to present to clubs and stuff, so that I could get gigs. And then it turned into like an actual album. Yeah, that's what me and Jillian had discussed. And then it turned into like an actual album, like because I had written all this music.
Yeah.
So then we used a couple of studio musicians, and we brought in all these different like piano players and someone, Chris Fudge, what's his name? Chris, what's his face from Shrimp Chaperone? Well, he plays a whole bunch of instruments. So he played all the guitars and bass and everything. We got other people playing the piano. It was just like a real group effort to make Queenie come together. But since then, I've been working a lot on this kind of more electronic-y sound. So I've been working a lot with the DJs. So taking these loops that I'm using and mixing them with other sounds to create whole songs. But the beautiful thing about, Just Najima is that, like, I can also, like, me and Eric can get together. We can do small gigs where I'm playing traditional blues and classic jazz, or I can play my kind of more electronic, kind of out there
Bjork covers
type
right?
stuff that I'm trying to, the sound I'm trying to, create my
Southwestern Gothic
Gothic soul, like when I'm trying to, the sound that I'm fiddling around in my lab with.
Well, when you need a guitar player, you give me a call.
I don't know if I'm misremembering this, but my recollection is that when Julie Patton was here with Paul Curran, that she said that that she'd had a lot of trouble playing with, having people play with her because they wanted to fill everything up, and that he was really content to just leave it spare when it wanted to be. And that's one of the feelings that I got from what you were doing, Eric, that you didn't feel like you needed to fill up all the silences all the time.
In this musical conversation, no one is there to listen to the guitar player. I'm just supposed to stay out of her way. So
that's another reason why it's Just Najima. It's a multi-use name. Great.
Yeah. We're getting close to our time limit, which is just a social limit, not anything else. But so maybe a couple more things, and then we should probably let the hardworking performers have a rest. But
one of the things I wanted to say was Charles and I were under the illusion that I might be able to come there for this event. Clearly, we're not ready for that yet, but I look forward to seeing you all in your natural habitat soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember we started one time we talked about this was in China, and we had dreams of I remember bringing you over here, and I'm sorry that the pandemic intervened, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
I think we'll be around a while longer. I know, Segway's been around since the 70s. We have been around. I think next year we'll begin our 25th year, but I hope we have a few more.
Yeah, me too. It's great to have to be able to read with you, Najima, and thanks, Charles and Tenny.
And Steve and Lisa.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So this was really sweet, and I guess we'll call it a night and wish everybody well. So thanks so much for doing this, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Have a good night.